Well, hi everyone. How are you? We are going live right now, and we want you all to come on in, come on in, come on in. And if you haven't already, this is Trisha with Trisha Speaks, and we're dealing with some wonderful information today to keep you all well informed as to everything that's going on. Come on in, and if you haven't already, please like this video and subscribe. Hit that subscribe button right down there. Okay. And of course, as you know, this is Trisha Speaks, and I'm Trisha. And what I'm going to do is keep you all very well informed as to what's going on. I'm a certified financial capabilities coach and credit coach and house certified HUD certified housing counselor. So I'm dealing with a lot of things that really are impactful to my clientele and to all those that are concerned. And again, we welcome you to this live today as we talk about the CARES Act in you. And I told you all before that CARES Act means the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Securities Act. CARES Act, okay? And it's impactful in a lot of ways ever since it has been signed into law a few weeks ago. And it covers a lot of things. And it's so in depth and it's so deep. I could only do uh, just one particular subject a day. And so today we're going to deal with the CARES Act as it relates to evictions, as it relates to the eviction moratorium. And and that became very important to everyone simply because a lot of people have been laid off. And if you have a question, be sure you can uh, put it in our in the be sure to ask a question. Now, sometimes I want you to ask a question just to let me know that you're out there and that you're listening. So just go into the chat, if you will, and just let me know that you're there. Ask a question so that we can answer the questions that's important to you. It's a very important subject matter because when you think about um, how everyone needs to be up to date and well informed as it relates to this very important matter of finance and the economy. Um, and so this is Congress ways. The CARES Act is the Congress way and the president's way of stimulating and keeping things flowing and moving um, as we have had to shelter in place for the last month or so. And some will continue even after this. There's no going business as usual because this is a very unusual time and it's a very unusual space. It's altogether different, and people are having to do things altogether differently, right? But the very important thing, because there have been so many unemployed people, I'm talking about in the millions, the absolute millions of unemployed people. We've had in every state, they are logging big numbers relative to unemployment. And they say there's more unemployed, now than it was during the Great Depression. And for you that are my history buffs, you all know the Great Depression was a big deal. There was food lines, all sorts of things that were going on. And so now here we are again in a very serious, brought on not by a stock market crash, but brought on by a pandemic. And so they're having to do something. So we're talking today about the federal eviction moratorium. And what I am referencing, and I'm going to give reference to, they frequently ask questions that come up with this, but this particular um, uh, synopsis comes from the National Housing Law Project. The National Housing Law Project. We do subscribe to them, and we are part of them, and we're so glad for them because when you can get someone to take something that's so thick, so big, so wide, and they can break it down where I can understand, so that then I can break it down so that you all can understand who don't have time to just dig into the weeds, or they're using a whole lot of jargon that one doesn't understand. And so the one thing about this eviction moratorium, which is, I think, it's extraordinarily important, is that it's going to protect your hardworking, well-meaning tenants who, had it been any other time, they would have been able to make their rental payment had they had the money, had they had the savings or whatever. And we'll talk about that as we deal with some other things about preparation and what have you. But for those things that you're talking about, for those, I say again, had it been any other, for these people are responsible. They would have made their rental payment if they could have. And the fact that they are not making it is because they can't. You can't get blood out of a turnip. Most people, as we realize, and we've done studies and surveys, we find out that the majority of hardworking, I'm talking about working Americans, they generally work from paycheck to paycheck. Most often, their lifestyle is set up from paycheck to paycheck. Not a lot of them have. Not a lot of Americans have what we call a lot of rainy day kind of savings or 401ks, or things that you can just run to and maybe get something to tide you over. There's a rule of thumb that says you need to have at least 6 months of expenses that's in a rainy day savings, at least 6 months. Now, you all know that's a lot to accumulate when you're having to pay this one, that one, and the other one, right? When you gotta, when the utility bills are due, when with utilities, when you're thinking of cable, lights, water, all those things that go along with that. And if you live in this in certain municipalities, the utility bill can be just as much as the rent. Think about that. Your utility bill can be just as much as the rent. I have a lot of people who are what we call on affordable home assistance, affordable housing assistance, which they usually use as a Section 8, some affordability program or whatever, which tries to keep their rental payment, or their payments, their monthly housing payment, right about 35% of their income. So most of them, the rent is probably about 450, 550, 650, somewhere along in there, right? But then they're coming up with some of these utility payments are coming up at 550. I'm talking about per month. 650. Had one client come into my office. They brought a payment, a rental bill, and they showed it to me, and it was $770 some dollars. I said, "This truly must be 2 months." They said, "No, it's one miss. No, ma'am. This is 1 month." And then they said, and I said, "Well, you must have a pool, or you must have something of that nature." No, ma'am. No, ma'am. It is just interesting how it can, something was just so high, and it really just was a budget buster, a budget buster. And so it's important then, if you're trying to, the most important thing that we have to deal with during this time, and we call this is a classic, what we call a classic crisis, right? And people are working on what we call a crisis budget. They're working a crisis budget. What is a crisis budget, you may ask us, before we get into this, talking about this moratorium. Crisis budget is where you pay just what you have to pay for life and living, which means um, a roof over your head, your utilities, and food, in one order or the other, whichever one's most important. And generally, most important thing is trying to have at least keep a roof over your head. The next thing you're going to try to do is keep the lights on if you can, and then you're going to try to eat. So some people, Um, whether or not you can keep the lights on to eat. Sometimes you have to think which one is the most important. But anyway, so as we're in here today and as we're talking, we're going to talk about this moratorium and the eviction moratorium. And I think it was good that the Congress and President knew it was important that if when you lose your job and you don't have a place to stay, that is one way that you're going to crash. Come on, you're going to crash the system. And so you had to keep the people in a place. So this is what this what we call this rental moratorium is all about. And this is supposed to make sure that for reliable, dependent tenants of good faith, that they will be able to stay in their home and they cannot be evicted because of non payment. And that is extremely important. They could not be evicted because of non payment for at least uh, 30 days or so. The eviction moratorium operates by restricting um, and asking, because there's some things some places you can restrict because they have what we call tax credit properties. Other ones you cannot restrict because they are they're privately owned, and you can only ask that they not move forward. Now, one thing municipalities can do, they can stop the courts from it, because eviction is a legal process. You have to understand what eviction is. When you're being sued for eviction, or being you receive a summons for eviction, that has to go through a court process, has to go before the judge. And so every time, everyone cannot um, do that, right? So when we're looking at the moratorium, this moratorium, is need to understand, does not explicitly state whether evictions for non-payment of rent or fees or charges includes eviction motivated by the tenant's non-payment of rent or other fees, but formally based on a no-cause lease termination. Now, what that simply means is that this to be to be under this moratorium, it has to be because of you're not making the payments, or the person is not making the payment due to a hardship, an economic hardship that has been brought on by this virus. Now, this does not cover if you're being evicted for, or the person is being evicted for any other cause, such as uh, they did something illegal, such as a list of things that there's a lot of things that go into what we call the no cause or without a cause kind of for lease termination. But this moratorium specifically deals with for non-payment based upon a hardship. Now, we've told, and the thing that it does, if this is a HUD property, if this is a uh, HUD tax credit property, if this is a property that the mortgage is being held by what we call a GSE, which is a government backed entity, a government owned entity, right? Such as an FHA property, a Fannie, a Freddie, then this moratorium can extend to that, right? It's hard to, though, if you have some what we call landlords who have what we call private property that's solely owned. Then you'd have to be sure to be communicative with them, and so that we don't want them to be bad actors. You know what I'm saying? So you would have to communicate what your issue is, that if you've been laid off, your hours have been significantly cut, just let them know the hardship, and that as soon as you get back up on your feet, you will try your best to get back um, in good graces. Now, this is extraordinarily important because um, there are people who are not able to make their market, their rental payment. They're having just that much hard time. They cannot do it. There's nothing there. We have people that are in, uh, just so you know, that they're in food banks, food pantries. They're being overworked. Now, I will say here in this area, which is the in the Southwest Georgia area, it is in the Georgia Department of Community Affairs have given a lot of locales and location um, local governments some funds to help assist people who have been hard hit in these matters, such as um, some they haven't. Um, we haven't. Matter of fact, we're having a meeting coming up to discuss how that's going to be disseminated for people who can get some mortgage relief, get some rental relief, get some food relief. To try to get this out to the people that need it. But in the meantime, before you can get your hands on actual cash, what they're going to do is saying that if you're in one of these type of apartments or residents that is covered under this, that you do get the moratorium, the 90-day moratorium. Now, the one thing that it doesn't cover is that you cannot have been at the place where you were going to be kicked out anyway, in the middle of the process. If you were in the middle of the process, it will, continue. But they can't start a new action if they're one of these covered practices, on one of these covered properties. They can't start a new while you're under this hardship. And like I say, what has backed this up a lot, local municipalities have actually closed down the courts, the eviction courts, and so it's be hard to move since eviction is a legal process. So I am glad to be able to present some of this information. Like I said, this and summarize some of this and make it easy, good little bites, because it's a very thick, thick act, and so it's a lot. Sometimes too much for a person to chew all at once, right? So you have to take bits and pieces of it, and you have to take that you can. Um, I and sort of ingest it that way. And so hopefully I've been able to do that by just breaking it down just a little bit. And then I say again, just to repeat, if you have been impacted through by way of financial hardship during this shelter in place, this very massive pandemic, then what you'd have to do, you have to um, uh, be communicative with your landlord. Let them know what is going on. And if you're in a HUD property or a tax credit property or one of the properties that's covered under this, member that's owned by FHA, Fannie, and Freddie, any one of those, then you'll be covered under this moratorium. If it's outside of that, then you'll be at the behest of the landlord to let them know. And if you've been a reliable tenant, a person that always paid their rent on time or pretty much on time every month, mind you, they're not going to want to get rid of you. They're not going to want to get rid of you. They're going to want to keep you. They're going to want to make sure that they do whatever they can do. Now, of course, in every situation, you got what we call bad actors. You got people who don't operate or who don't, act accordingly. And sometimes they have to be pushed a little bit. In that case, you could be free to give us a call if you need to. And I'll put in our office, um, our local office. You can give us a call, and we'll be. Matter of fact, I probably need to put in my 800 number um, for you all so that you all could call us. Um, and I have to get that. And I'll probably put it in, add it in the description, so that you all can get that 800 number, um, and be able to call us if you have a question. Like I said, we're a HUD um, approved housing counseling office, and that's what we're there for. We're there to be of assistance. We're there to answer questions. Um, and I thought I had that right here at my hand, and I don't. But you can reach me. Let me put our email address there. You can reach me at Best Life Skills. Look at this. You can email the questions Best Life Skills at gmail.com. You can email me at this email me at that email. If you have any further questions, or for those that will come on outside of this live, you can email me at that email address and I can answer those questions for you, maybe in more detail. Maybe if we have to do an online, a virtual counseling session, since everything that we're doing now is by way uh, virtually. We're set up to do that and we're set up to do outreach. We'll be more than happy to work with you and looking forward to working with you um, and answering questions. Um, as I said before, this is a very interesting time that we're in. It's a time that uh, something that I never would have expected to come down to this. You know, I've been around, thank God, for some time. And this is something that I never thought that I would see. So we are certainly um, have the best thoughts for you and yours. We want you to remain safe. Make sure you follow the various protocols of your community, and make sure you wear a mask. I told somebody one time, I said, you run this and it to be remain safe around this time. If you should act like everybody you come in contact may possibly carry this virus, and so therefore you stay 6 feet away from them. You wear your mask and make sure they wear masks before encountering or talking to you or being your face about anything. Be careful where you go. A lot of things are opening back up, which I can understand. I can understand. You want to get this economy going. You want to get in the process. People are getting um, cabin fever, as it were. We know that people are getting cabin fever, so they got want to get out. But all I can say is, when you get out, make sure you move responsibly. Right? Make sure you don't want these numbers to be going the wrong way. Don't want them going up. We want to hurry up and get this thing settled and as few people affected as possible. Although a lot of people have been affected, if we can sort of turn these numbers around, it'll be a great thing. So it's been great interacting with you today. Again, I have my email address that's on the is in the chat that's down below. Give us drop us an email, and we'll be glad to speak with you, glad to talk with you more as it relates to the CARES Act and you, and as it relates to today. We've been talking about eviction moratorium. You've been with Trisha Speaks, and I'm always speaking about something that's going to help you to be the best, get the best, live the best, right? So you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day, your evening, your night, or whenever you listen to this live. All right. Be sure, if you haven't, make sure you like this video and make sure you subscribe as we continue to build this channel for it to be um, the best out here. All right. Have a good one. Trisha Speaks. Take care. Bye.